Hi guys, so are any of Rishi Sunak's talking points breaking through? Are any of his pledges bearing fruit? Or is it all falling flat with the general public? Here Cain, a former Downing Street aide, told Sophy Ridge of Sky News that the picture for Rishi Sunak and the Tories is pretty grim. He brought up a very interesting point about the 2019 general election, which saw Boris Johnson win a massive majority. That many Labour voters stayed at home, and now they will come out and vote for the party, which will be a double whammy for Sunak. Have a listen.
On the programme today, we've been talking a lot about our voters panel and how they're feeling about the government. And what we've been looking at on the voters panel, it's a group of people who voted Conservative in 2019. So, the election campaign that you were front and centre of, and where they're going to splinter to now. What are you picking up on how the voters that Boris Johnson won over, are they still going to be backing Rishi Sunak? Is there any hope at all for the Conservatives?
So I think anyone who's spent as much time in focus groups as I have over the last year or so will tell you it's a pretty gloomy picture for the Conservatives. I think Rishi inherited an incredibly difficult playing field after Liz Truss, but it certainly hasn't improved since then. I think in the Red Wall in particular, I think all the polling looks pretty bleak. And I think, in 19, a lot of Labour voters were staying away because they didn't want to vote for Jeremy Corbyn, so a lot of them sat on their hands. So it's slightly overcooked in terms of how popular Boris was, because I think, in those areas, Corbyn did drive them away. But Boris also did bring a lot of new voters over to the party, and I think both of those groups are probably now going to move away and back towards Labour, because they won't have the same emotional pull away from Keir Starmer that they did to Corbyn.
How about reform? Are they mixing things up, or do you think they're a bit of an irrelevance?
I think they'll eat away at the Conservative vote. I think that's the big thing they'll do, because it's almost the flip side through. So those voters, some of them might appeal to reform, some of them will stay at home, and the Labour vote will be higher than it was in 19. So it's all quite a gloomy picture for the Conservatives.
Which is great to hear, a gloomy picture for the Conservatives. Now, there are a few things to talk about here. First of all, the Conservatives themselves. Rishi Sunak inherited an absolute disaster from Liz Truss, but he promised that he would turn things around. He promised that he would grow the economy and he would restore trust in politics. He would act in a professional manner. Now, he hasn't succeeded in either of those. The economy is still stagnating. The cost of living is still biting, so people are not seeing any improvement there. And when it comes to professionalism, well, he's just sacked Lee Anderson for his racist and bigoted comments. And Suella Braverman is still in place. And Liz Truss is gallivanting around the world, undermining his position and talking down Britain and undermining the UK's allies, like Joe Biden in the White House. So it's an absolute disaster. And while foreign policy isn't really on people's minds, the cost of living is. And Rishi Sunak has done nothing to improve people's lives economically. So I think taking over from Liz Truss was a disaster. But if we compare this to 2019, why did Boris Johnson win a massive majority? Well, it was basically down to lying, telling the public he would get Brexit done. And of course, this was enough to get enough people to come out and vote for him. People were tired of Brexit and they needed a change. Now, there's another reason why I think Labour are going to do very well. And we can compare Labour's possible wins this year with what happened in 2019. This is a very interesting article from 2020. Key points from review of 2019 Labour election defeat. And there's a few things here highlighted in this article, which I'll leave a link to, which point to a possible significant win for the Labour Party this year. The defeat was huge. The winning again is a vast challenge. Yes, it will be a challenge. And it seems that perhaps some things have turned around. Now, some of it is down to Labour, but a lot of it is down to what the Conservatives have been doing since Boris Johnson won in 2019. The result came from a long-term issues masked by 2017 result. So it says here, yes, so support for the Labour Party increased dramatically in 2017, but declined in 2019. Jeremy Corbyn was deeply unpopular. So as you can see here, in 2017, he reached his peak. He was not extremely popular, but he was quite popular in 2017, but dramatically declined after that. And going into the general election, he was extremely unpopular with the public. Now, he was popular within the party, and he was popular with his supporters, obviously, but with the public, there were deep concerns with him. Now, whether those concerns were valid or not is another issue, but I keep saying perception is important in politics, and he was perceived as being a fringe candidate. He was perceived as being cozying up with terrorists, for example. Now, none of this was true, but it was the perception, and unfortunately, when it came to the right-wing press, he wasn't able to push back significantly and convince the public, no, I'm actually a decent human being. The Brexit policy was completely confused, yes. So when it came to answering questions on the doorstep, the Conservatives had a massive advantage because they lied. Boris Johnson's campaign was, let's get Brexit done. This came out of focus groups that Dominic Cummings had organised. So they were asking the public, okay, what do you want us to do about Brexit? And probably somebody came up with the slogan, get Brexit done. Just let's get it done. We're tired of it. We don't want to talk anymore about Brexit. It's undermining, families. It's undermining relationships. It's deeply divisive. Let's get rid of it. And the Tory policy was, okay, let's get Brexit done. And if we get Brexit done, we can move on to talk about the NHS, cost of living, things like this. Levelling up, for example. But on the Labour side, you had some Labour voters, Labour MPs or candidates were talking about having a second referendum. There was talk of another renegotiation with the European Union. Others wanted to stick with a hard Brexit, no deal Brexit. There was all sorts of ideas being pushed by the Labour Party, and it was deeply confused. Now, once again, the liars were successful. Boris Johnson and the Tories said, we'll get Brexit done, and that was an easy message to sell. It was completely ridiculous and a lie, but it succeeded. Next, it says the manifesto was unrealistic. I think the manifesto was a good manifesto. There were good policies in there, but they were sold in a very bad way, and perhaps there were too many of them. So there wasn't a clear single vision, but there were too many policies. Now, it is ironic that the manifesto was seen as unrealistic by the public. Once again, whether it was unrealistic or not, it's all about perception. But the fact that it was perceived as unrealistic compared to what's happened since 2019, was it 400 or 500 million pounds being spent on Rwanda and nobody has been sent there. It is sad looking back at how Labour were seen as having unrealistic policies. A perfect storm of obstacles, Brexit, Corbyn, and how the party was disorganised. Also a disorganised national campaign here. Yes, there wasn't clear policy. You had Labour MPs contradicting each other in interviews as well. Poor ground campaign. Loss of older socially conservative voters. This is very interesting. This is something that is going to be probably undone at the next election, because we're seeing also the older generation, the boomer generation, are switching back to Labour, it seems, according to polling. They are seeing how their children, grandchildren are struggling to get on the property ladder. They see that the Tories have done nothing since they've been in power, and they believe that, well, we actually need to have some change. The party was seen as the party of city dwellers. I think this is also another interesting change, how rural voters are traditionally conservative. But we're now seeing even farmers and the rural communities come out in favour of Labour. So a lot of these things here were working against Labour in 2019, and they are now working in Labour's favour in the next election. But of course, the main point, of course, is that the Tories have trashed the economy. They have not restored trust in public services and in politics, and that will be their undoing, I think. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.